Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to be here. So, true to the name radical, we are going to be challenging a lot of conventional thinking in this next hour. And what I want to share with you is, where some of this conventional thinking goes wrong and what do we do instead? So let's start by challenging this first idea, which is so pervasive, which is that your product is successful when you reach this nirvana of customer delight. What we've learned is, if your product is delighting people, that's when it's successful. And there are all these words that get thrown around. Words like, we have to be user-centric, customer-driven. We have to transform to be product-led. And there's design thinking thrown around. But the main idea behind this is that, to be customer-centric, we have to give customers what they want by iterating quickly. And when I work with companies, the quote I hear so often from leaders and executives is, we have to ask customers for feedback, and then we have to be lean and agile to deliver it. Many of our companies that have gone through agile transformation recently, a lot of that agile transformation was with this purpose of being able to deliver whatever the customer is asking for by being agile, so we can be faster at delivering that, right? When we step back for a moment, what we realize is it's really time to call BS on this. The nirvana for our product should not be customer delight. And I want to give you a real example for why that's the case. I want to show you a real life example where, being agile and delighting customers actually it doesn't guarantee a successful product. And I want to share the example of a startup called Knack. This was many years ago. The founder of Knack, Paul, had come to me, and he was telling me about his startup. He had been inspired by the suspended coffee movement, which started in Italy about 100 years ago. And if you haven't heard of suspended coffee, the way it works is you pay for 2 coffees. One is for yourself, what you drink, and the second is paid forward for someone who could use a random act of kindness. Now, Paul was inspired by this suspended coffee movement, and he built an app so that people could pay it forward and give what he called random acts of coffee. So he started Knack to do that, and Paul shared his numbers with me. And if you looked at his numbers looked fantastic. He had an ardent group of daily active users. He had high NPS scores. And he even had organic growth, which, as product managers, that's about as good as it gets, right? When you get organic word of mouth growth. But Paul was not happy. Why? Because there was one metric that he realized was really not good, and that was a key indicator. That one metric that he really was looking to was this metric of, how many people are actually using the app to spread kindness and buy someone else a coffee. And it turned out it was 0. Everyone was coming to the app to actually get free coffee. They were all there to get free coffee. No one was actually spreading kindness, right? So what went wrong? It turned out that Paul had caught many product diseases. And these product diseases are so easy to catch. They really are ubiquitous. And I've caught so many of these diseases along my own journey, right? And so let's do a checkup. We'll do a checkup where I'm going to share some examples of these diseases that Paul had caught. And, feel free to share in chat, for example, share if you've seen these diseases. So this first disease is obsessive sales disorder. Right? Obsessive sales disorder happens when, we are focusing on the short term. We're trying to delight customers in the short term, but, in the long term, it's not really getting you closer to your vision, right? In this case, Paul was giving customers what they wanted, and what they wanted was more free coffee. And he was even investing his own money on funding coffees in the app, and just, customers wanted more and more and more, right? And so that's obsessive sales disorder. In your company, you might be seeing a version of this where maybe you're working on custom features and kind of random features that customers might be asking for, but you feel, maybe that's not right for your long-term vision for your product, right? That's obsessive sales disorder. Feel free to share and chat if you've seen this disease before. This next disease is hypermetricemia. Right? Hypermetricemia happens when we're obsessed with metrics and analytics and moving metrics up and to the right. In this case, all of Paul's metrics were looking fantastic, but those weren't the right metrics to be measuring in the first place. It didn't matter how much time people were spending on the site or the number of, ardent users that he had. What really mattered was anyone using this app to actually spread kindness, to pay it forward, to buy someone a coffee, right? And so that's hypermetricemia, where we're obsessed with metrics without really thinking about, is this the right metric to be measuring in the first place? And then this next disease is narcissist complex. This happens when we're so focused on our own goals, we're focused on looking inwards at our needs, and we're so focused on being inwards focused that we become disconnected from what the customer actually needs. So in Paul's case, for example, Paul felt like if he just had this feature to be able to pay for someone's coffee, that, well, he would use this app to buy someone a coffee. And so he figured, if he just had a payments feature to buy someone a coffee, well, others would use this to spread kindness. And it turned out that's not how it is, right? And so especially if you're in a very engineering-led organization, you might see narcissist complex where we're thinking, of some shiny object that if we just release this, customers are going to love it, right? And that's an example of narcissist complex. Okay, so why do these diseases happen? They're so pervasive, and I've seen these diseases across every industry and size of company I've worked at. And I've worked in, broadcast, media and entertainment, robotics, advertising, even wine. And I've worked in various sizes of companies, all the way from startups to government agencies and multinational companies. And what I've found is that these diseases are common across industries and sizes of companies because they're a symptom of not being vision-driven, meaning when our iterations are not driven by a clarity of vision and strategy, that's when we catch these product diseases. So what do we do instead, right? And why does this happen? Let's look at kind of how does iteration fit into this whole picture. The analogy I like to give, and this very visual analogy, is that, being lean and agile, it's the equivalent of having a fast car. It is absolutely great to have a Ferrari or a McLaren. It does help you get to where you want to go faster, right? And I am absolutely not criticizing customer feedback in any way. Customer feedback is important to get. So in this analogy, customer feedback is like sitting in your fast car and stopping to ask someone for directions to make sure you're heading the right way. But when we step back, when we stop for a moment and we think about it, what we realize is we're in the driver's seat, and before we get into this fast car and start driving, and before we stop and ask for directions, we have to know, where do we want to go? Like we need to know the destination and roughly how we're going to get there, right? And only then are we going to be able to get there faster. So this is where radical product thinking comes in. Radical product thinking is a methodology for building world-changing products. And the way it's structured is that it gives you this step-by-step practical process that helps you build these world-changing products. And it's a book that's available in bookstores, anywhere where books are sold. What it gives you is this system to engineer the change you want to bring about. What I mean by that is, if you want to engineer change in the radical product thinking way, it means starting with this clarity of vision. What's the end state you want to bring about? Then translating that into a strategy, meaning, what is a set of actionable steps that to translate this vision into reality? then into a set of priorities, then into hypothesis-driven execution and measurement, and finally, you can apply all of these ideas to engineer the culture you need for innovation. And in the radical product thinking way, each of these elements, they are designed as tools that you can use to communicate and bring your entire team with you on the journey. Now, until now, everything that I've said to you, you might hear this and say, well, I've heard words like vision, strategy, I've heard about prioritization. What is new about this? I don't hear anything radical. And now let's just get ready for something radical. What I want to just shake up for us is we need to unlearn so much about what we know about what is a good vision, because it's just really toxic, because we've learned that a good vision is big, hairy, audacious, unchanging. It has to be memorable so that it's a slogan. All of these ideas need to be shaken up, because these are based on ideas where we think that vision comes from a leader at the top and everyone else is just following along. And that's not how creating change works. And so we need to forget all these old ideas about what is a good vision and rethink things. And let's try this exercise, right? Here's why this vision, here's why these broad, unchanging visions are not good for any organization. And the example I'll use is NAC's vision, right? Like, this wasn't NAC's vision, but I could have written NAC's vision as follows: contributing to human progress by empowering people to spread kindness. Right? What is wrong with this vision? Because this is what we're taught is a good vision. It's broad, it sounds inspiring, it's short, memorable. And so let's do this exercise. Give me wild and crazy ideas as to, why, give me ideas for products that could be described by this vision. And since I'm asking this question, I'll give you the first example. This idea of contributing to human progress by empowering people to spread kindness, that could describe my parenting philosophy. I am empowering my kids to spread kindness, and that's contributing to human progress, right? This could also be the vision for a company that is nudging people to donate to charities. So an app that nudges you to donate to charities, right? It could be a vision for a social media company. I mean, literally anything goes when you have a vision that's so broad. Your vision is no longer acting like a filter. You can pretty much hold up any feature and say, should I do this or not? And this vision says, sure, go for it, right? What you need instead is a filter that says, actually, no, don't do this. And so what we need is not this broad and fluffy vision. What you want is a vision that articulates the who, what, why, when, and how. Meaning, whose world are you changing? And it's not everyone's. What does their world look like today? Meaning, what is the problem? And how are they solving it today? The next question then is, why does their world need changing? Because honestly, maybe it doesn't. Then you can ask the question, when can you say mission accomplished? And finally, this is finally where you talk about your product. You can ask, how are you bringing this about? What is your product doing to be able to bring about this change? And so in the radical product thinking way, to answer these questions, the RPT way gives you this fill-in-the-blank statement so that you can focus on these questions instead of being stuck on finding the right words, right? There's no reason to wordsmith. Your vision has to be authentic and deeply felt. It has to be a conviction. It doesn't have to be a slogan. And so with that, let's talk about how did we apply this at NAC. We started with a vision. And in thinking about our vision, we really had to rethink our product as a mechanism for change, right? So the change that Paul envisioned was spreading kindness and getting people to pay it forward. And the product was just an app to be able to get people to participate in these random acts of kindness or random acts of coffee. right? So that was this vision, thinking about a product as a mechanism to create change. And then once we had thought about a product as a mechanism for change, then we could write this radical vision statement. So this is how it would read. Today, when people who often go to coffee shops, so notice it's not everyone, it's people who often go to coffee shops. So when they want to spread kindness around them or say thank you to someone, they have to remember to pay it forward. And they have to overcome this awkwardness if they're trying to pay for a stranger. This is unacceptable because it results in these acts being rare and not a habit. We envision a world where spreading kindness is easy and it becomes a habit for people. We're bringing about this world through an app that makes it easy to create random acts of kindness by buying someone a coffee to brighten their day. Now, this vision is describing what we want to bring about. And maybe a year or two later, we're going to change this vision and maybe we expand beyond people who go to coffee shops. So don't think about your vision as this unchanging behemoth. Your vision can be very specific and you change that as you need to, as market needs change, as you discover what your users actually need, right? So once you have a vision, that's good, but you then need a strategy to translate that vision into a set of actionable steps. So in the radical product thinking way, a strategy is detailed. Again, it's not this fluffy 2-page document where you say, you know, we're going to invest 10 million in this initiative and it's going to result in a $50 million ROI, right? Like that's not what that's not helpful to anyone. And so a good product strategy answers 4 questions. And the easy to remember mnemonic is radical, or RDCL, which stands for real pain points. That's the R, meaning what's the pain that makes someone come to your product? This is where you do user research and customer journey mapping. The D answers the question, you know, what's our solution to solve that pain? And this is where you apply design thinking. Next, you think about your capabilities, meaning what's the underlying engine that allows us to power this design? This is where you think about technical infrastructure, perhaps partnerships, relationships. All of these are elements of your engine. And then finally, you think about logistics, which is, by the way, the most often forgotten part of strategy. We always think, let's just build the product first, then we'll think about the business model or how we'll sell it, right? But instead, those have to be comprehensive elements of your strategy. You need to think about your business model. How are you going to support this product? How will you train people on it? So in the case of NAC, we had to start by asking, you know, what's the pain point? What makes someone engage with this product? So in NAC's case, right, I as a user, I'm joining to claim a coffee that someone sent me, but you know, I hesitate to buy someone a coffee. I've just never done this before. And so what's the solution to this? The solution is we need to get users to experience this joy of giving someone a coffee, and we need to get them to experience this joy before we can teach them to pay for someone else's coffee. So that's the solution. In terms of capabilities, we had to think about, well, what's the engine that's going to power the solution? Because we don't have infinite funding to keep giving away coffee, right? And so in terms of capabilities, Paul went and established partnerships with brands so that we could deliver a feature that basically meant that each user gets 2 coffees, not one. One coffee is the coffee they consume. The second coffee, they must gift to someone else. So this way we're teaching someone to gift a coffee. And then later we'd add the payments feature so that you can buy someone a coffee, right? And then finally, in terms of logistics, we changed our pricing model. We made our pricing model so that our pricing was now a percentage of a brand's sponsorship fee. And these were brands that, you know, wanted to get behind this message of spreading random acts of coffee. Okay, so that was our strategy. Next, we had to prioritize all these things we had to do into a set of next steps, right? And so prioritization is where you deal with this pesky problem of survival, meaning we talked about the long-term vision. Well, now you have to survive long enough to achieve that vision, right? So what does that mean? It means that you have to think about priorities, kind of like the yin and yang. This is what we intuitively do, but it's good to make it explicit. The yin and yang is we think of the long term versus survival, which is short term. So for your team, it's important to display this yin and yang. And the easiest way to do that is to display it as an X and Y axis. So you can communicate how you think about this yin and yang, right? And so your Y axis is vision fit. Is this good for the vision or not? And the X axis is this good for survival or not? Right? So things that are good for vision and survival, well, those are easy decisions. That's ideal, right? But if we only focus on those easy decisions, just what is ideal, then we're still being myopic, because sometimes you need to invest in the vision. That's when it's good for the vision fit, but it's not helping you in the short term. And the opposite of that is when we're doing things that are good for survival, good for the short term, but they're not good for the long-term vision. Remember, we talked about obsessive sales disorder. Well, every time we are doing things like custom features, maybe it's not good for the vision, but hey, it helps us win that deal. That's taking on vision debt. It's like technical debt, but on the vision side, right? And too much of that leads to obsessive sales disorder. And so how did we prioritize things across these quadrants? Well, we started by investing in the vision. We realized that we had to throw out the complete code base and restart development. The code base was just such a mess. And so we had to start by investing in the vision. Then what did we do? Then we built this feature of giving people 2 coffees each, one to drink and one to gift. But to support that ideal feature, we had to do something under vision debt. We had to take on vision debt. We had to build some functionality so that brands could see their marketing campaign and how many people they had reached through this campaign. And without that, brands weren't going to get interested. And so we needed to take on a little bit of vision debt to be able to support the rest of what we were doing. So this is how we prioritize things. This approach to prioritization, by the way, really helps convey to your team how you think about these trade-offs, so that even when you're not in the room, when your developer is making decisions without you, that they can think like you. This helps you spread your influence, right? And one last feature was the ability to take a payment from the user. It wasn't helpful in the short term, but it was good for the long term. We needed to start to teach them to take payment or to pay for buying someone a coffee. So those were priorities. Then we translated it into hypothesis-driven execution and measurement. What do I mean by that, right? We had a key hypothesis. Our strategy, like we could write a hypothesis on our strategy, and that hypothesis was, if the experiment we run works, then this is the outcome that we expect, because this is the connection. And so our hypothesis was, if we train users to give a coffee that's sponsored by brands, then by gifting this free coffee, users are more likely to then spend their own money to spread kindness, because they'll start to enjoy spreading kindness through coffee. So that was our key hypothesis. And there were 2 metrics then we started measuring, which was the number of people who are gifting free coffees from brands and the number of people who are spending their money to gift coffees, right? And so what did we find? We found that, initially, if you remember, 0% of people were paying it forward. But once they had learned to gift a free coffee, we were finding that 27% of people, and this was just the first try, just with the first try, 27% of people were now spending their own money to buy someone a random act of coffee, right? And so the key point here is that all of those popular metrics, such as daily users, time spent on site, NPS scores, I'm not saying they're irrelevant. Those are things that are important to measure, but they weren't indicators of progress towards NAC's vision. And so a key metric that we measured was this measure of, the percentage of users who are using their own money to spread kindness. So the key takeaway here is that we need to build radical products, right? And the definition of a radical product is that it's your constantly improving mechanism for engineering change. We talked about delighting customers at the very beginning. Where does delighting customers fit in? Delighting customers is only a means to an end. It's a means to an end to create the change that you want to see. If you piss off customers, well, it's going to be hard to create change, right? Because nobody will engage with your product. So yes, delighting customers is important, but only as a means to create the change you want to see. Now that I've given you the example of NAC, what I want to share with you is that you can apply these ideas anywhere where you want to create change. And I want to share with you a truly inspiring example, one that means a lot to me. And I interviewed the head of this organization for my book. And I think the whole story of how incredibly vision-driven this organization is something for all of us to learn from. And the example I want to share with you is an organization that makes papadums. So, if you've eaten papadums, which are the lentil crackers you get in restaurants, in Indian restaurants, right, which are often eaten with chutney. Well, most of us have eaten papadums, but it's unlikely that you would know the secret that actually there's one organization that dominates the papadum market. And this organization has 60% market share in papadums, and the rest of the market is hugely fragmented. They have over $220 million in annual revenues. And the most important fact, they're owned by 45,000 women who are all equal partners. So let me share the story of Lijjat and how it started. Lijjat started in 1959, and it was started by 7 women. What they wanted, the change that they wanted to create, was that they wanted to earn a dignified living. These women lived in a patriarchal society, and they were dependent on their husbands for income. They couldn't contribute to household income because they weren't educated, and their only skill, they felt, was cooking. And so they didn't have job prospects, but they wanted to educate their kids so that they could raise their kids, raise that next generation out of poverty. And so these 7 women got together and they decided that they would make papadums, which are, by the way, really a labor of love. Papadums are hard to make, and my grandmother knew how to make them, but I've never seen my mom make them, for example. Right? And so these women got together, they decided they would make papadums, they would sell the papadums, and whatever they got out of it, they would split the profits or losses equally amongst themselves. So that's how this started with 7 women. So they started rolling papadums on their building's terrace. And soon these 7 women became 25. And at the end of a year, they became 300 women. And soon they no longer fit on the building's terrace. Well, today, papadums are made by Lijjat member sisters still, but they have a huge operational system where these buses pick up women from different pickup locations. Then they bring them to these centers to pick up dough. The member sisters then take the dough back home and they roll papadums at home. The next day, they come back, they drop off the papadums they rolled, they pick up the next batch of papadums or next batch of dough to roll, and then they get paid for what they had rolled, right? And every 6 months, they share an equal percentage of profits. So if you talk to any of these Lijjat women, you don't hear a slogan. What you hear is a deep, heartfelt conviction. Each person shares a vision statement in their own words, but it's the same thing that they all say. And I wrote this down, based on what the president of Lijjat said. The change that they envision is bringing financial independence to women by allowing them to earn a dignified living. And papadums is just their mechanism for creating that change. And so I wrote their vision in this format after listening to the president of Lijjat. So their vision would say, today when women without education from poor households, when they want to run their household and when they want to educate their kids, they have to depend on their husband's income and they can't influence household spending. This is unacceptable because it limits their children's educational prospects and it repeats the cycle of poverty. We envision a world where women become self-reliant and it leads to their socioeconomic progress. We're bringing about this world through high-quality papadums and later other fast-moving consumer goods. without ever taking charity. So that was their vision. But as you know, vision is only the first step in engineering change. They needed a strategy. And that means asking, well, what are the real pain points? What do these women need for a dignified living? And there are two main pain points. One is that, they have a high work ethic, but low education. The second pain point is super important, which is that these women are primary caregivers in a patriarchy, which means they have elders or kids to take care of at home, and they cannot leave home for very long. So these women couldn't go and work in factories, for example. So the design meant that these women needed to work from home. So the entire operational model for Legit is based on these women being able to work from home. In terms of logistics, these women then, they had to adopt training, for example, training to think about decentralized quality control. A lot of the capabilities were also about how do you have this mindset for sharing profits equally. But I'll let you read about this in the book. But, this was also applied to prioritization. And, how do you apply all of these ideas in your priorities so that you can create change very systematically? So it involved investing in the vision, rarely taking on vision debt, and doing more things in ideal quadrant, as well as investing in the vision. And in terms of how Legit measures success, it's by the number of women to whom they give financial independence. And that's about 45,000 women. And so the key takeaway is that you can engineer change that you want to bring about by taking this systematic approach. And if you'd like to learn more, you can get the Radical Product Thinking book. You can ask about workshops and radical product thinking training. You can download the free toolkit on radicalproduct.com. And lastly, you can message me on LinkedIn, and I would love to answer your questions as well.